Okay, so how's everybody doing today? Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. It is Tuesday, August 6, 2019, and we are live. So I know it's been a very trying and emotional past few days because of the two mass killings, more than just mass shootings. These were mass killings that took place in El Paso, Texas, as well as Dayton, Ohio. And I've been reading a number of articles about the killings that took place, the mass killings. I've been watching MSNBC the past few days. So I wanted to go over some of this information, some of these articles I've come across. And when the shooting in Texas took place, the mass killing in Texas took place, I was in Atlanta. Okay, so I was getting email alerts from the Washington Post and other news sources. And I was at the Black Agenda on Tour event in Atlanta. And, so I was monitoring the mass shooting and dealing with the event. And then things started to mushroom from there, and we started learning more information. And then the early Sunday morning, you had the mass killing that took place in Dayton, Ohio as well. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share some of this information with you that I've come across and give you some of these articles. And then also African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. And we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network as well. Email us at customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com, customer service at africanhistorynetwork.com. Now, if some of you all saw the broadcast that I did before I left for Atlanta, and I forgot the name of it. I've been doing so many broadcasts, but it's on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. I have to look and see what the topic was. I don't even remember. But one of the things I talked about is that the language that Trump uses to talk about undocumented immigrants, some of that same language was used to talk about enslaved Africans. It's either the same language or similar language was used to talk about enslaved Africans. And what happens is that you put negative pejorative terms onto people, negative pejorative names on the people, to relabel people, to then justify the mistreatment of people. Okay? And this is the same thing that Donald Trump is doing. All right? Now, I may say some things that go outside the circumference of some people's awareness as we get into this. Okay, just because you never heard it before, disagree with it, or don't like it does not mean that it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. Number one. Number two, when I'm talking about and when I'm going to break down, I'm not dealing with hate speech. Okay, I know on social media platforms there have been some changes to what you can say and what you can't say. Their guidelines have changed. This is not hate speech. I'm going to quote some things from Trump, but I'm dealing with history. I'm dealing with facts and evidence. I'm going to quote NBC News, Washington Post, New York Times, etc. So this is not hate speech either. Okay. All right. So first, let me. I want to show you some of the language Trump has used in the past dealing with undocumented immigrants. Okay. He calls them illegals, but it's really tricky. For a number of reasons, it's really tricky for him to refer to people as illegals for a number of reasons. Okay, number one. But let me show you some of this language that he uses. Okay, hopefully this screen share will work because it's been acting up a little bit here. Okay, let's bring up the screen share for a number of reasons, and then we look at the manifesto from the killer in El Paso, Texas. He referred to them as illegals. He's using some of the same language that Trump uses. Okay, but when you understand that Texas, as well as other states in the Union, but especially Texas, used to be part of Mexico, you know, I understand borders and things like that, but it's really weird when you have people who stole 2.3 billion acres of land want to label other people as illegal. Okay, I understand borders and I understand laws, things like that, right? But you're talking about some of the same people that violated over 371 peace treaties with Native Americans. Okay, so I just find that very interesting. Okay, let me see something here. Will this show? Here's some of the language that Trump uses. This came from MSNBC. This was a segment on MSNBC. Infest, thugs, infiltrate, killers, criminals, under siege, massive crime, crime-infested breeding, pour into our country. This is some of the language that Trump has used in the past. Okay, then we see when he was in Florida on May 8th, 2019, and we see the language he used. Well, first of all, he was talking about an invasion, and he said he said you can't stop it, and somebody yelled out, "Shoot them." This is what was said. I'm not promoting it. This is what was said. He laughs instead of condemning it. He laughs and he says, "Only in the Panhandle can you get away with something like that." So when you have the commander-in-chief, when you have the most powerful man basically in the world using his bully pulpit not to condemn that type of language that dehumanizes people, but really to promote it, because he's at a rally, instead of him saying, "No, we don't talk like that. No, we don't do that. No, we don't treat people like that," he encourages the behavior. All right, I want to bring this up to show this to you here, and then we'll continue. This is running a little slowly. Then we'll continue. But if we look at, while I wait for this to come up also, if we look at the article from NBCnews.com, 2 mass shootings in less than a day, at least 29 dead and 53 injured. Okay, 2 mass shootings in less than a day, at least 29 dead and 53 injured. This is from NBCnews.com, August 4th, 2019. It was updated August 5th, 2019. Okay, it says over less than 13 hours and nearly 1,600 miles apart, 2 mass shootings this weekend left at least 29 dead. Now it's basically, it should be probably 31 dead, because there's 22 dead in El Paso. I learned it's pronounced El Paso. I forgot that from Spanish, because Americans pronounce it El Paso, but it's actually El Paso. So it's basically 31 dead and at least 53 injured, leaving the country reeling from yet more gruesome scenes of violence and death. Now, on Saturday morning, a gunman opened fire into a crowd at El Paso, Texas, at an El Paso, Texas retail area that is popular among both local residents and shoppers from just across the southern border with Mexico. So what was taking place, and what a lot of people don't understand about the southern border with Mexico, you have a lot of the same things that take place at the northern border, which is the northern part of the U.S. and Canada. You have trade going on. You have commerce going on. Okay, and then we'll get back to this, because see, this is what happens when people are being lied to, and what Trump is doing is he is spreading fear, preying on people's ignorance, and he's engaging in the othering of other people. Okay. So here's some language that Trump uses to describe specifically undocumented immigrants: infest, thugs, infiltrate, killers, criminals, under siege, massive crime, crime-infested, breeding, pour into our country. That this doesn't include invasion. Invasion is another one. You relabel people. You put these negative pejorative terms onto people to strip away their humanity, to dehumanize them, to then justify the mistreatment of them. Because if their humanity was respected, people would not allow them to be dehumanized like that. Okay, this is Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about this in post-traumatic slave syndrome. Okay, and she talks about how you relabel people to justify the mistreatment of people, to absolve yourself of any responsibility. She calls it cognitive dissonance. Okay, read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. So when we look at the language that Trump uses to dehumanize people to justify their mistreatment and to get away with the language that he uses, okay? Because he would never speak like that about white undocumented immigrants. He would never speak like that in a rally, on Twitter, in a cabinet meeting, anything. He would never speak like that about white undocumented immigrants. So what this deals with also the fear that some white people, not all white people, that some white people have of the browning of America. And the fear that by 2043, that white people will no longer be the majority population in this country. And some white people, not all of them, some of them have a fear of this. This fear is being fed to them basically on a daily basis by right-wing conservative radio, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, I don't remember if Geraldo Rivera is still on, still has his radio show, but people like this. And then on the Fox News network, this is being fed to them on a daily basis. Okay, so if we look at now, what's important for people to understand what this article breaks down, and we'll post the name of this, we'll post the link to this article also because I want you to read this stuff. At the U.S. Mexican border, the majority of what takes place is commerce. The majority of what takes place is commerce. People are going back and forth across the Mexican border each day, from the U.S. to Mexico side, Mexican to U.S. side. They're going to shop. People are going on vacation. They're doing commerce. Some people may work over in Mexico. Some people on the Mexican side may work in the U.S. It depends. It's the same thing that happens at the U.S.-Canadian border. Now, I live in downtown Detroit, Michigan. I live 4 minutes away from the Canadian border. People cross back and forth from the Canadian border to the U.S. side, Canadian side all day long. You have some people who are Canadian citizens. They work in the U.S., many of them in the medical fields. You have people on the U.S. side that go over to the Canadian side for the nightlife. They go spend money. They go shop. I remember some years ago, my girlfriend at the time, we went over to Canada for her LASIK eye surgery because the doctor she wanted was in Canada. You just had Bernie Sanders and some other people who went into Canada to buy insulin because the prices of insulin in Canada are cheaper than in the U.S. So you have commerce going back and forth at the U.S.-Canadian border. You have commerce going back and forth at the U.S.-Mexican border. When you actually study what happened at the El Paso, Texas, at the Walmart in that shopping mall, okay, you had Mexican citizens on the U.S. side who came over legally to do commerce, to shop. So on Saturday morning, a gunman opened fire into a crowd at El Paso, Texas, retail area that is popular among both local residents and shoppers from just across the southern border with Mexico. They were coming over to spend money. You have many Mexicans coming over legally to spend money. Then early Sunday morning, a shooter attacked a crowd outside a popular bar in Dayton, Ohio, as patrons were enjoying a night out. Okay, so this is in Dayton, Ohio, not Toledo, like Trump said when he's reading from a teleprompter and said Toledo instead of Dayton. Okay, no, this is Dayton, Ohio. One suspect was in custody in El Paso, Texas. Federal prosecutors were treating it as a domestic terrorism case. And this is how it's going to be prosecuted. It's going to be prosecuted as a domestic terrorism case. Associated Press has reported this. In Dayton, Ohio, responding officers killed the gunman, police said. Both attacks follow a week in which Gilroy, California, Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia were each struck by gun violence. So if we look at the update that we see, and there's a lot of updates. I was looking at a lot of different articles that read Washington Post, New York Times each day. Washington Post just billed me also today for the digital subscription. We see that in the, let's see, one of them, in Gilroy, that is, let me get the actual article here. That's being investigated as, I think they said, domestic terrorism. I pulled that article up. Let's see here. Which one is that? Okay, I'll look at that because that was some news that just came out as well today. Okay, FBI opens terror probe into California attack, says shooter explored violent ideologies. Okay, yeah, this is from today. Okay, this is Washington Post. The FBI said Tuesday it had launched a domestic terrorism investigation into the shooting at a California festival on July 28th that left 3 dead and more than a dozen others injured. Investigators said they found that the 19-year-old gunman had delved into quote-unquote violent ideologies and held a list of possible targets across the country, including religious institutions, political organizations linked to both major parties, that means Democrat and Republican, federal buildings and courthouses, such as John F. Bennett, said John F. Bennett, special agent in charge of the FBI's San Francisco office, at a news briefing on Tuesday, August 6, 2019. He declined to identify them. The gunfire at the Gilroy Garlic Festival, an event that draws tens of thousands of visitors annually, sent terrified visitors fleeing from a chaotic scene. Among the dead were 2 children. Okay, so this is Washington Post reporting today. And then also, I think we already posted the article on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, the one for the New York Times. Okay, so this is all taking place at the same time. Now, both attacks, El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, both attacks follow a week in which Gilroy, California, Brooklyn, New York, and Philadelphia were each struck by gun violence. Okay, let's post this link here on the thread of the broadcast. Just bear with me. This is running a little slowly. Now, what do we know about the El Paso, Texas attack? At least now it's 22 are dead and another 26 were injured at a Walmart around the nearby Cielo Vista Mall. Okay, so you had people shopping at the mall doing back to school shopping when this attack took place. Now, what we found out is that the killer doesn't even live in El Paso, Texas. He lives 10 to 11 hours away in the suburb of Dallas, Texas. All right, and he was driving that way. He got lost, goes to the Walmart to eat. He eats and then gets his gun, opens fire. NBCnews.com has an article talking about this, how in conducting this investigation, they found out he got lost, okay, and ended up at the Walmart. All right, now, police received their first calls on the incident at 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. One male suspect has been brought into custody. The shooting is being treated as a domestic terrorism case. The U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Texas said on Sunday. Now, we've seen an increase in these domestic terrorism cases. All right, now, I posted an article a few days ago, and the testimony from FBI Director Christopher Wray has resurfaced. If we look at the article from Washington Post, and I'll post these articles here when we're done, because I have a bunch of them, okay? FBI faces skepticism over its efforts against domestic terrorism, all right? This is Washington Post, August 5th, 2019. In recent congressional testimony, senior FBI officials said they were conducting about 850 domestic terrorism investigations, a decrease from a year earlier when there were roughly 1,000. The category covers more than just racist violence, but officials say such motivations are a large part of their domestic terrorism caseload. Okay. Yet by other measures, the threat of white nationalist violence appears to be rising. Between October and June, October 2018, June of 2019, there were about 100 arrests of domestic terrorism suspects. And if that trend continues, the total for 2019 would outpace the prior year, when there were about 120 such cases in 2018. Okay. The year before that, about 150 domestic terrorism suspects were arrested. Now, FBI Director Christopher Wray was testifying in front of Congress, and he said that, quote, "We will bring the full resources of the FBI to bear in the pursuit of justice for the victims of these crimes." Okay, well, this was Sunday night he said that. When he testified in front of Congress 2 weeks ago, he said, quote, "We, the FBI, don't investigate ideology, no matter how repugnant. when it turns to violence, we're all over it. That poses particular challenges in the world of white supremacists who often do not belong to specific groups, but instead find congregations of similar-minded people online and feed each other's anger and hate. One of the problems is that there needs to be new laws surrounding domestic terrorism. This is one of the problems, the lack of laws really surrounding domestic terrorism. Okay, so read the rest of this. Read the rest of this article. It's about a 4-page article. I already read through it, but read the rest of this article. All right, now let's put this over here. That's from the Washington Post. Okay, so the shooting in El Paso, Texas, is being treated as a domestic terrorism case. Texas authorities are still investigating the motive for the shooting. But El Paso Police Chief Gregory K. Allen said Saturday evening that it appeared he had, quote, a nexus at this point in time to a hate crime, end quote. Okay, so the manifesto or screed surfaced. It's believed that is written by the killer Patrick Crusius, 21 years old, okay, who lived in the suburb of Dallas, Texas. Now, John Bash, U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Texas, said his prosecutors were investigating Crusius, quote, with a view towards bringing federal hate crimes charges. And we found out on the 5th, Associated Press reported that it is going to be looked at as a hate crime, if I remember correctly, looked at as a hate crime also. Let's see, we have that as well. And let me see, we'll bring that up. BlackAmericaWeb.com had an article dealing with that as well, picked up from the Associated Press. Okay, so we'll get to that as well. All right, and a lot of these I'll post here. I want you all to read these. We'll post the articles when we're done, so I don't have to keep flipping back between these screens. Okay, so we're also treating this as a domestic terrorism case. Bash said this means it appears to be designed to intimidate a civilian population, to say the least. It appears to be designed to intimidate a civilian population, to say the least. And this is basically what the domestic terrorism is. It's hitting a targeted group of people to get them to change their behavior, okay? To get them to change their behavior. We're treating it as a domestic terrorism case, and we're going to do what we do to terrorists in this country, which is to deliver swift and certain justice, he said, okay? Now, when we look at Dayton, Ohio, and we'll come back to El Paso in just a minute because New York Times has a good article. El Paso's shooting suspects manifesto echoes Trump's language. El Paso's shooting suspects manifesto echoes Trump's language. So Trump's people are trying to distance him from the language that Crusius mimicked. Now, in the manifesto, he said that he held something to the effect he held those beliefs before Trump became president, when became president-elect in 2016. But we see he and Trump using similar or the same language, especially referring to a Hispanic invasion or using the term invasion. We see the same thing. All right. Now, when we look at Dayton, Ohio, at least 9 people were killed and 27 injured outside Ned Pepper's bar in Dayton, Ohio. Police who were in the area responded, okay, responded to the shooting just after 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, the shooter was wearing body armor and carrying multiple rounds of ammunition. All right, so he had a .223 caliber AR-15 assault rifle, and he had 100 rounds. So NBC News has an article where they show where they show the drums of the magazines that he had. He had 100 rounds loaded. Okay, so he was ready to go to war. Now, Anthony Reynolds told NBC News, told NBC's Today show Sunday morning that he was exiting the bar at 1:05 a.m. when the gunfire broke out. Anthony Reynolds said he knew the exact time because he was looking at his phone while he was walking past the line of people waiting to get into the club. He said once we got to the end, once we got to the end of the line, which is near the corner, you heard one gunshot. You heard boom. So we looking around, we didn't know what it was, and then you hear a second boom, and then after that, it was a complete rapid fire for like 1 minute. Okay, so that suspect has been identified by authorities as Connor Betts, okay, 24-year-old white male. Now, as NBC News reported, his ex-girlfriend said that there were some warning signs. Now, also, Connor Betts also killed his sister, Megan Betts, who's 22 years old. She was one of the 9 victims, okay? Now, after Dayton Police Chief Richard Beale said Sunday there was, quote-unquote, nothing in Connor Betts' record that would have prevented him from buying firearms, high school classmates of Connor Betts, of the shooter, told the Associated Press that he made, quote, a hit list and a, quote-unquote, rape list, their words, not mine, targeting classmates while in high school. So there were red flags there. And his girlfriend talked about how, you know, this stuff really wasn't followed up on. There were red flags. When the hit list came out in 2012, about a third of students at Bellbrook High School, where Connor Betts attended, skipped school out of fear, according to the Dayton Daily News. Chris Baker, the former Bellbrook principal, confirmed to the Dayton paper that the gunman was suspended for causing a lockdown when he wrote a hit list on a bathroom wall. So that's all he got, was a suspension. Quote, my name was on the rape list, end quote, one woman who asked not to be named told the Associated Press, saying police called her during her freshman year to let her know she was a potential target. She said after his suspension, the gunman returned to school. The gunman returned to school, and she didn't receive any warning. Okay, she said after his suspension, the gunman returned to school, who threatened her, but she did not receive any warning. I didn't know you could threaten. I didn't know you could have threats like that and then return back to school. I didn't know that was possible. So when we look at the response and the fallout, so Donald Trump has condemned both attacks, saying on Sunday, quote, hate has no place in our country and we're going to take care of it, end quote. So you saw my Facebook post. I said, so Trump said hate has no place in this country. Does that mean he's leaving the country? Was that what that means? Because after this, I don't understand how Twitter can justify not taking down his Twitter page for his tweets, targeting Hispanics, targeting Representative Ilhan Omar, targeting the squad. You know, I don't understand how Twitter, after this, I don't understand how Twitter can justify not taking down or not flagging his tweets, not giving him a warning, not suspending him from Twitter. I don't understand how they can justify that. So Trump said he's in contact with Attorney General William Barr, FBI Director Christopher Wray, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and Ohio Governor Mike DeWine this weekend. Now, you've been attacking FBI Director Christopher Wray. Now you want his help, because you fired your former FBI director because he wouldn't back off of the Russia investigation. That's what you told Lester Holt, May 11th, 2017. So Trump said he'll make a more detailed statement on the shootings on Monday. So he did make a more detailed statement. He made a statement on Monday. It wasn't detailed. He didn't talk about what actions were going to be taken. The other thing that is interesting about Trump's teleprompter speech is that he didn't say that he condemned white nationalism, white supremacy, things like this. He said we have to condemn it. He didn't say that he condemned it. And what many people are saying, and many experts in counterterrorism, former people who used to work for the FBI, is saying that that's a wink and a nod to the white supremacists in his base. Okay? That he's still with them. That's a wink and a nod to them. He's not saying I condemn it. And then also, so there was There was a tweet that Trump sent out before he did his little teleprompter speech, okay, on Monday. And he talked about the need for background checks, but then immigration reform. One don't have nothing to do with the other. Why are you trying to tie immigration reform to background checks? But then in his teleprompter speech, he didn't talk about the need for mandatory background checks for guns. Now, Democratic politicians blame Trump's rhetoric for stoking hate in the country, including several presidential candidates. Julian Castro, Senator Cory Booker, they both argued Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press that Trump's rhetoric has created a climate of hate in light of Saturday's mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. Now, the climate of hate already existed. It has been exacerbated. It has been ginned up by Trump, who's giving cover to a lot of the white supremacists, because what he's doing is legitimatizing many of their feelings and using some of the same language that they're using. You see the same language on Fox News, talking about an invasion, demonizing undocumented immigrants, even demonizing immigrants. Okay, you see some of the same language. I showed you some of the language that Trump is using. I talked about this a few days ago on my broadcast. This is before the mass killing in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio took place. Infest, thugs, infiltrate, killers, criminals, under siege, massive crime, crime-infested, breeding. Now, it's interesting he uses the term breeding, because when we study the history of slavery in this country, we know that some African women were used as breeders. They were referred to as breeders. And then usually breeding is a term you use for animals. So when you refer to human beings and you talk about breeding or breeders, that's a dehumanizing term for them. All right, how's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you get advertised with the African History Network. Also, if you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. That helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, broadcast our Sunday night shows, etc. Now, I will be in Brooklyn, New York, Saturday, August 24th, Friday, August 23rd, for the Black Agenda Tour. Michi X, Jice Johnson, Jade Arendelle, and others. So you'll hear more information about that also, okay? And we'll have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and the BlackAgendaOnTour.com, the BlackAgendaOnTour.com. Okay, let's continue here. Let me skip past some of this because I have a bunch of articles. You know, I got back to Detroit, got back home Monday morning, 4 a.m. I wanted to broadcast on Monday, but I was just too tired. So I said we have to do this on Tuesday. All right, so Julian Castro referred to the anti-immigrant and anti-government screed that senior law enforcement officials told NBC News they believe was written by the El Paso, Texas shooter. The presidential candidate from Texas said he saw a link between Trump's anti-immigrant commentary and the, quote, toxic brew of white nationalism, end quote, in America. He said, quote, when he didn't step up right away and condemn the neo-Nazis after Charlottesville, Virginia, okay, August 2017, allowing the crowd for 13 seconds to chant, "Send her back," a couple of weeks ago, he doesn't have any credibility anymore. Well, Trump didn't even have any credibility before that, okay? Because you remember him referring to African-American football players who are silently, peacefully protesting, taking the knee to protest police brutality and racism, things like this, calling them SOBs, okay? See, this is the language that Trump uses. These are the games that Trump plays. Like all Americans, I still hope that this president will do what most presidents have done throughout our history, which is to realize we have to do everything we can to try and unite Americans instead of fanning the flames of bigotry. But see, this is Trump's re-election strategy, to fan the flames of bigotry. Okay, how do we know? All right, so let's look at this article from Washington Post, July 27, 2019. Trump campaign sees political advantage in a divisive appeal to working class white voters. This is what this is all about. Okay? Trump sees this basically as his only way to re-election. The economy is slowing down. He hasn't built the wall, and even though I think they went to the U.S. Supreme Court and they ruled that he can use the $2.5 billion to build the wall. What nobody wants to tell you all is that they're going to have to confiscate people's homes, confiscate people's farms, confiscate their land along the border to build the wall, which means those are going to go to court. It's going to be tied up in court in years. So they're still not going to build the wall. Okay? I mean, they may build 3, 4, 5 feet of it, if that. But see, there have been articles that have been written about court cases that are still going on today. And people's land along the border, the government was trying to take that land because of eminent domain. And these people went to court. Okay? So you're going to have those cases in court for years. And they can't build the wall until there is a final decision in those cases. Okay, so Trump campaign sees political advantage in divisive appeal to working class white voters. This is what this is about. So what white supremacy does is it pits groups of oppressed people against each other to fight one another. So the 1% or 10% can stay in power. All right. Let me pull up this article here. Let me see. I thought I had it. All right. We'll pull that one up also. All right, so this one talks about how Trump launched another broadside Saturday on Democratic political opponent, calling Representative Elijah Cummings, calling his Baltimore district, quote, disgusting, rat and rodent infested mess, and saying no human being will want to live there. Once again, dehumanizing terminology. All right. So if you look at page 2 of this article, it talks about how, but Trump's advisors had concluded after the previous tweets that the overall message sent by such attacks is good for Donald Trump among his political base, resonating strongly with the white working class voters he needs to win re-election in 2020. That's what this is about. This is his re-election strategy, okay? Because he can't run on his record. He can't really run on his record. I mean, he can run on two Supreme Court justices, and he can run on, about 100 and close to 140 federal judges confirmed, right? But this is his main strategy, okay? To stoke the fears of bigotry, stoke the fears of fears that white people have, the cultural anxiety, things like this, like he did in 2016, but it's even going to be worse this time. So this has prompted them to find ways to fuse Trump's nativist rhetoric with a love it or leave it appeal to patriotism ahead of the 2020 election, while seeking to avoid the overly racist language the president used in his tweets about the 4 congresswomen, the squad. It is not clear whether Trump will abide by such limitations, however. The president kicked off his Twitter attack Saturday morning this is a couple weeks ago, Saturday morning, by calling the black lawmakers' Baltimore district, quote, very dangerous and filthy place, end quote, a very dangerous and filthy place. All right. Now, what's interesting is Trump doesn't talk that way about Republicans in their poor districts, because there's a whole lot of poor white people who vote Republican in Alabama, in Mississippi, in Kentucky, where Moscow Mitch McConnell. He doesn't talk about districts that are Republican districts that are poor. He doesn't Republican districts that have been hit hard by the opioid crisis, okay? And you have a high number of deaths because of the opioid crisis. You have an increase in crime because people are committing crimes to get the money to buy the drugs. He doesn't refer to those districts like that. I wonder why. There was an article that talked about this. The reason why is because he needs their votes. Okay? He needs their votes So he's not going to refer to them like that. All right, how's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Let's continue. And I was trying to bring up the article. I had it here. I have so many tabs open. So just bear with me. I'll give you the, we'll post the name of all these articles here. All right, so that's what this is about. So it's going to get worse. So, but see, once again, elections have consequences. This is what I was explaining to people in 2016. People didn't want to listen. And so now people are watching Professor Eddie Glaude, I almost called him Professor Eddie Fraud, because that's what I call him. When he was on Nicole Wallace show, I think yesterday, and it's been viewed over 1 million times, and he's talking about Trump and racism, and this is on us and all this stuff. Yeah, but in 2016, you were on MSNBC, and you were telling people don't vote for president. You said vote for everything else but president, because you ain't like Hillary Clinton, you didn't like Trump. Well, if they didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, what the hell do you think was going to happen? So you were telling people on MSNBC, don't vote for president. Now you got a job on MSNBC talking about how bad Trump is. Because he's African American. Well, he ain't there to praise, he's not there to praise Trump. They got a whole list of black people to praise Trump. He's not one of them. So he's there to talk about how bad Trump is. Well, that's what we were telling you back in 2016 when you're talking about don't vote for president. Elections have consequences. And then when you look at the article from Real Clear Politics, because I posted the article from Huffington Post about his viral video, and I said, wait a second, this is the same guy. See, I call him Professor Eddie Fraud because I've been following him for years. Okay, and you know, every now and then he'll say something that sounds good, but I remember. Hold on, wait a second. I remember what you said in 2016. So. Now you got a job talking about how bad Trump is after you told people, and he was on News One Now where Roland Martin said the same thing. Okay, so game recognizes game. Don't come now talking all this stuff. That's what we were telling you back in 2016. All right, but Real Clear Politics has an article that talks about this, and he said that he overestimated white people. In October 2018, he was on the Nicole Wallace show. See, I watch MSNBC all day. I do research all day. MSNBC is on right now. It's just muted. Okay? He said he overestimated white people. He said he didn't believe white people would elect Trump. It's like, well, come on, man. You got a PhD and you this stupid? Come on. All right, so research that, and we'll post a link. Real Clear Politics, okay? Eddie Glaude, MSNBC, I overestimated white people, October 2018. Watch that. All right, let's continue here. Then we posted the article from the Atlantic.com. Now, this is from 2018. See, what Trump did was Trump diverted funds that went to fighting against white supremacist organizations. Under Obama administration, he diverted funds to fight against Muslim extremism. Okay? But the domestic terrorists have committed more acts of violence in this country since Trump has been elected, basically that period of time, than Muslim extremists have. All right? If we look at this article from the Atlantic.com, this is from October 29, 2018. It's called Trump Shut Programs to Counter Violent Extremism. This is one of the reasons why you see a rise in this. There are less checks and balances on them. This is what I was telling people in 2016. Now, first of all, I told them this ain't about one person versus another person. This is about ideology and the future of the country the next 20, 25, 30 years. All right? And then if you see the lecture that I do, and I did it in Atlanta for the Black Homeschooling Conference, July 21st, 6 Principles of Political Self-Defense, understanding how policies and laws impact the economic conditions of African Americans. And I also did it this past weekend where we were back in Atlanta for the Black Agenda on Tour. Okay, this is one of the things I explain in this presentation that I do, and understanding that you had a lot of Republicans who were following an agenda. The agenda was to gain control of the U.S. Supreme Court, the federal courts, overturn Roe versus Wade, and they are trying to influence law and federal law, things like this, for the next 20, 25, 30 years. Everybody that voted for Trump in 2016 wasn't a big Trump fan. Some of them voted for him as a last resort because they were trying to fulfill this agenda. And they saw him as a tool to fulfill the agenda. If we look at this article here from October 29, 2018, Trump shut programs to counter violent extremism. The administration has hobbled the infrastructure designed to prevent atrocities like Pittsburgh. All right, this is an example of how elections have consequences. This is a reversal of policies from the Obama administration. Now, there have been probably close to 200 policy reversals that Trump has made, reversing policies from President Obama. Here's an excerpt of this article. In the waning days of Barack Obama's administration, the Department of Homeland Security awarded a set of grants. Who the hell is sending me these messages? Just a second. Let me mute this. I'm sorry. Jade is sending me a message. What the hell? All right. In the waning days of Barack Obama's administration, the Department of Homeland Security awarded a set of grants to organizations working to counter violent extremism, including among white supremacists. One of the grantees was Life After Hate, as the Hill.com has called. Now, the Hill.com is a political website, do political news. It's a very, very good website, the Hill. You'll see me post some articles from the Hill, which the Hill has called, quote, one of the only programs in the U.S. devoted to helping people leave neo-Nazi and other white supremacy groups. Okay? These grants were designed to target these white supremacist groups and bring people out of this. If you watch on MSNBC, they have a documentary called Breaking Hate. And one of the guys they interview is somebody who was a former white supremacist. He talks about how he got into that life, how he was radicalized, and now he works to bring people out of that life, deprogram them, things like this, because he understands how they got sucked into it. He understands, the whole process, okay? So another grant went to researchers at the University of North Carolina who were helping young people develop media campaigns aimed at preventing their peers from embracing white supremacy and other violent ideologies. So in the Obama administration, they had these programs funded to work against this. That stuff has been gutted under Trump. But soon after Trump took office, his administration canceled both of these grants. In its first budget, it requested no funding for any grants in this field, okay, to divert people from white supremacy to fight against it. It's part of a pattern of neglect. The grants were administered by the Office of Community Partnerships, which works intimately with local governments and community organizations to prevent jihadist and white nationalist radicalization, okay? Which works intimately with local governments and community organizations to prevent jihadist and white nationalist radicalization. In Obama's last year, according to the former director, George Selim, S-E-L-I-M, the office boasted 16 full-time employees, roughly 25 contractors, and a budget of more than $21 million. The Trump administration has renamed it the Office of Terrorism Prevention Partnerships and cut its staff to 8 full-time employees, okay, as opposed to 16, and its budget to less than $3 million when the budget was $21 million. Under Obama, the Office of Community Partnerships housed an interagency task force on countering violent extremism, or CVE, countering violent extremism, that included officials detailed from the FBI, the National Counterterrorism Center, and the Departments of Justice, the DOJ, Department of Education, and the Department of Health and Human Services. Today, the task force exists in name only. It's been gutted. Its staff members have all returned to their home agencies and departments. Quote, under this administration, Selim says, who now works at the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, he said, quote, there's been a precipitous decline in the dedicated staff and program funding devoted to combating ideologically motivated violence, end quote. Trump has reversed all that. This is an example of how elections have consequences. This is what people don't understand. Okay? Let me post a link here to this article. This is from October of 2018. This is from theatlantic.com. Okay? All right. Okay, Alex, he said donate. Okay, if you want the link here to donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Also, I have a new online course starting up Thursday, August 8th. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is a 8-week, 16-hour online course, so this is a new section starting up. We'll start with class 1. If you want to register for that, we'll post a link here, and then also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So this is regularly $130. It's on sale $80. We do the classes live. They're all recorded, so you can go back and watch it over and over again. We deal with thousands of years of history. We deal with also understanding the origins of white supremacy, racism, things like that as well. We'll post a link here. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Okay. So now this is from October 2018. All right. So then NBC News. That's from theatlantic.com. Read that article. So then NBC News has the article from August 5th, 2019. We have a problem. Federal agencies scramble to fight domestic terror with limited resources. Why? Because the funds have been diverted by the Trump administration. Because elections have consequences, and this is the agenda Trump is pushing. We have a problem. Federal agencies scramble to fight domestic terror with limited resources. The Department of Homeland Security has cut resources that were once devoted to fighting domestic terror, while the FBI assigns more agents to fight jihadists than white supremacists. Well, they're being directed to do this. Okay? Let's look at this article here. This is from August 5th, NBCnews.com. I can't remember if we already posted this on our fan page, the African History Network, okay? 2 mass shootings within just 24 hours have called, actually within 13 hours, okay? 2 mass shootings within just 24 hours have called into question the amount of resources that the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security have devoted to spotting and thwarting the threat of domestic terrorism in the United States. The top 2 members of the Senate Homeland Security Committee wrote a letter to Attorney General William Barr on Monday, renewing their request for information on how the Justice Department is carrying out its mission to protect Americans from domestic terrorism. Meanwhile, a Department of Homeland Security official who spoke to NBC News on Monday after a day of scrambling to arrange meetings and phone calls with local partners says the feeling at the Department of Homeland Security is, quote, uh-oh, we have a problem, end quote. You think after you diverted funds to fight against domestic terrorism and extremism, now you think you got a problem? Uh-oh, we have a problem. The first problem is sitting in the Oval Office. The first problem is the president. He sets the tone for all of this stuff. The official said that there's an effort to demonstrate that the Department of Homeland Security can do to... the official said that there's an effort to demonstrate what the Department of Homeland Security can do to confront the rising threat of domestic terrorists. like the shooter who killed 22 in El Paso, Texas on Saturday after posting an anti-immigrant diatribe online. So he talks about Hispanic invasion. He talks about he's protecting his country. This is what the killer in El Paso, Texas said in his manifesto, his screed that authorities think is was posted by him. Okay? He's mimicking the language of Trump. We look at the New York Times, August 4th, 2019. Look at this article. El Paso shooting suspects manifesto echoes Trump's language. El Paso shooting suspects manifesto echoes Trump's language. At campaign rallies before last year's midterm elections, Donald Trump repeatedly warned that America was under attack by immigrants heading for the border. Quote, "You look at what is marching up. That's an invasion," he said. He declared at one rally, "That's an invasion." Okay? 9 months later, a 21-year-old white male is accused of opening fire in a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, killing 22 people and injuring dozens more after writing a manifesto railing against immigration and announcing that, quote, "This attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas," end quote. This is what he said. Now, once again, this is not hate speech. This is not promoting hate speech. I'm reporting the news. This is documented, New York Times. Okay? So I'm reporting. I'm also a member of the media. I have a press pass. 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF in Detroit. All right? So I can document what I'm saying. Now, while other leaders have expressed concern about border security and the cost of illegal immigration, Donald Trump has filled his public speeches and Twitter feed with sometimes false, fear-stoking language, even as he welcomed to the White House a core of hardliners, demonizers, and conspiracy theorists shunned by past presidents of both parties. And you think elections don't have consequences. This is what happens when you have bad information. When you have bad information, you make stupid-ass decisions. This is what I was explaining to people in 2016 when I was doing nationally syndicated radio 5 days a week. And people didn't want to listen. Now, because of this, Donald Trump is ill-equipped to provide the kind of unifying, healing force that other presidents projected in times of national tragedy. Okay? So now Trump wants to get mad at President Obama for coming out and showing some humanity, okay, and talking about how we have to stand up in the face of, racism and things like this. Now Trump wants to attack Obama over this. Okay? Well, that's because, Obama's presidential and Trump is not. Obama's acting like a human being. Now, an intelligent human being. Donald Trump is a human being. I'm not saying he's not a human being. He's just a stupid ass one. That's all. In televised remarks on Saturday afternoon before boarding Air Force One to return to Washington, D.C. from his New Jersey home, because he was playing golf this weekend, crashed a wedding party, just living the life of Trump, right? Trump praised the performance of law enforcement officers and offered condolences to the victims and their families in El Paso, as well as in Dayton, Ohio. All right. He said, quote, "Hate has no place in our country, and we're going to take care of it." I'm waiting for him to leave. I guess that means he's going to leave if hate has no place in this country. All right. Now, on Monday morning, he used Twitter to call for Republicans and Democrats to work together to strengthen background checks for prospective gun buyers and pass new immigration laws. What does one have to do with the other? Okay, read this article. Then Mick Mulvaney, one of his sycophants, his acting chief of staff, goes on the Sunday programs to defend this nonsense. So I'm not even going to read these idiotic comments from Mick Mulvaney. If we look at page 5 of this article from the New York Times, dark anti-immigrant language has flavored American politics for generations. Politicians in the 1880s and 1920s rose to power by seizing on fears of Italians, Japanese, Chinese, and other immigrants, stoking fears about the loss of the American identity. This is history repeating itself. Go research the American Nativist Party, which was a political party in the 1840s and 1850s, the American Nativist Party, they were ostensibly known as the Know-Nothing Party. And they blamed immigrants, Italian immigrants, Greek immigrants, Chinese immigrants. They blamed them for taking their jobs. They were largely made up of groups of poor white people who were blaming immigrants for taking their jobs. This is in 1840s and 1850s. They were called the American Nativist Party, ostensibly known as the Know Nothing Party. And they were very ignorant also. Okay? So we see what Trump is doing is preying on the fears of the browning of America, and he's lying to his constituents. So he blames undocumented immigrants for taking their jobs, while at the same time saying this is the greatest economy in history. You got the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, down to about 3.6%. You got about 7 million unfilled jobs. You can't on the one hand blame undocumented immigrants for taking people's jobs, then on the other hand keep bragging about the stock market going through the roof. It dropped. The stock market dropped because and it's reacting to the trade war with China. You got about 7 million unfilled jobs. He brags about wages increasing. They're ticking up slightly. You can't have it both ways. But this is about demonizing undocumented immigrants so he could push his agenda, while at the same time he exploits the labor of undocumented immigrants at his golf courses in New Jersey and New York. So he's conning these people. Now what Trump doesn't want to tell you is that millions of middle-class jobs have been wiped out, not because of undocumented immigrants, but because of automation, robotics, software programs. A lot of the robots that have eliminated middle-class jobs are made by General Electric. But Trump won't tell his people this. If you go look at the Carrier plant in Indiana, when he Vice President Mike Pence was the governor of Indiana right before he became vice president. You had the Carrier plant where they used tax breaks to save the jobs at the Carrier plant. But if you follow up what happened at the Carrier plant, still jobs were lost. They upgraded the plant, put more automation into the plant, which eliminated jobs also in Indiana. So you got a lot of people at the Carrier plant there in Indiana who feel betrayed by Trump. Well, you should. He lied to you. There was an article called Getting to Know the Know Nothing Party. I think this is the one from the Boston Globe or something like this. I did a segment on my show 2 or 3 years ago dealing with this. Real Clear Politics has an article dealing with this, immigration and the rise and fall of the Know Nothing Party. See, a lot of people don't know about this political party, the Know Nothing Party. On this date in 1856, an anti-immigration political party held a nominating convention in Philadelphia. The American Party, the group called itself, although everyone knew it as the Know Nothing Party. It is instructive to look back at such events, especially in light of the nation's ongoing divisions about immigration reform. Now, this article is from February 18, 2015. In the 1840s and 1850s, American domestic politics was in the process of dividing North from South over the issue of slavery. Then a new source of angst presented itself. Huge surges in immigration to the U.S. from cultures and countries considered by some more exotic than previous waves that had arrived from England, Germany, and Scandinavia. On the West Coast, influxes of Chinese and Japanese workers found a new home. Millions more arrived in the East Coast, eastern United States, from Ireland and Italy. Most of these new pilgrims were Roman Catholics, okay? So being that they're Roman Catholics, there's already animosity because these colonies were Protestant colonies, okay? Coming from England, these were Protestant colonies. Several secretive political organizations were formed in reaction to this development. Some of the concerned activists had been Whigs, W-H-I-G-S, Whigs, which was one of the previous parties. At this time in 1856, the Republican Party is only 2 years old. The Republican Party was founded in 1854 as a result of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Okay, so you have to understand this chronology of history. Now, some of the concerned activists had been Whigs. Some had previously been Jeffersonian Democrats. Basically, the Jeffersonian Democrat named party. I'm not sure if they meant Jeffersonian or Jacksonian, but when we look at the Democratic Party, that is looked at basically formed right about 1828. Okay, now all professed their worry that the character of the country was changing. Pay attention to this. This is in 1856. Okay, this is 6 years before the Civil War. 5 years before the Civil War begins in 1861. All professed their worry that the character of the country was changing. They expressed many fears, among them that the new settlers were more loyal to the Pope in Rome than the president in Washington. There was a partisan component to the nativist movement. In the big northern cities, the Democratic Party had seamlessly folded the immigrants into existing political operations. Attempting to maximize their leverage, nativist advocates kept low profiles, often denying their machinations. Asked what they were up to by reporters, these activists often replied, quote, "I know nothing," end quote, which is how they got the ostensible name of the Know Nothing Party. It may have seemed a clever dodge, but newspaper men at the time couldn't resist this target any more than today's media could. By 1854, when the activists allied with a rump faction of the Whig Party, WHIG, to run a slate of candidates on an anti-immigration platform, they were labeled the Know Nothing Party. The following year, in 1855, the Know Nothings officially dubbed themselves the American Party. In 1856, they met in Philadelphia to pick a future president. That process did not go well. Millard Fillmore, Fillmore, was chosen as the party standard bearer. He would carry just one state in November, the state of Maryland, okay? But the seeds for the Know Nothing Party's demise were planted at their own convention. A wing of Southerners moved to pass a platform plank calling for the preservation of slavery. This alarmed many Northern and Midwestern Know-Nothings who bolted to another newly formed political entity, the Republican Party. Republican Party formed in 1854, okay, formed by groups, organized by groups of abolitionists. And then November of 1860, their candidate becomes president-elect Abraham Lincoln. Echoes of conflicting cross currents still exist in our politics today, and not only within the GOP. One comforting thought is that Abraham Lincoln, as usual, saw things clearly and before almost anyone else. Quote, "I am not a know-nothing, that is certain. How could I be?" he wrote in August 24th, 1855, in a letter to Joshua F. Speed, S-P-E-E-D. He said, quote, "How can anyone who abhors the oppression of Negroes be in favor of degrading classes of white people? How could anyone who abhors the oppression of Negroes be in favor of degrading classes of white people?" End quote. Our progress in degeneracy appears to me to be pretty rapid, Lincoln continued. I have retained his, quote, "As a nation, we begin by declaring that all men are created equal. We now practically read it all men are created equal except Negroes. When the know-nothings get control, it read when the know nothings get control, it read, quote, all men are created equal except Negroes and foreigners and Catholics, end quote. When it comes to this, I should prefer immigrating to some country where they make no pretense of loving liberty, to Russia, for instance, where despotism can be taken pure and without the base alloy of hypocrisy, okay, end quote. All right, so check out this article. This I've read this before. This is one of the articles I dealt with on my show, dealing with the history of the Know Nothing Party. Okay, there was another one that I was looking for from the Boston Globe. Okay, and it's not coming up in my bookmarks for some reason. But there's also one from the Smithsonian. Okay, Smithsonian Mag, which is the official website of the Smithsonian Institute. Okay, there's one they have there also, and that deals with the Know Nothing Party. And you see how these arguments are old arguments. Okay, and they were preying on the fears of white people who were afraid of immigrants back then in the 1850s. Going into the 1840s, 1850s, is doing the same thing right now. Now, there was another one. Where is that one here? I think I looked at this before. This is from January 26, 2017. So this is the same year. This is January 26, 2017. This is about 6 days after Trump took the oath of office, which was January 20th, 2017. This is from SmithsonianMag.com, which is the official website of the Smithsonian Institute. This is called How the 19th Century Know Nothing Party Reshaped American Politics. How the 19th Century Know Nothing Party Reshaped American Politics. From xenophobia to conspiracy theories. The Know Nothing Party launched a nativist movement whose effects are still felt today. Okay? So I don't have time to get deep into this. Read this article also. This is history repeating itself. Okay? Those that don't know history are destined to repeat it. If we actually understood history, we could fight this stuff and head it off. But since we all understand history, and Americans are woefully ignorant of history, both African Americans and white Americans, we're going through this nonsense. All right, so when we look at the NBC News article, and then, okay, we got Martha, we have Christy, just a few of the people watching. Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And visit also TFL28.com. for the Fast Life Challenge. TFL28.com. I know people are trying to get back in shape for the summer. You have family reunions coming up, things like this. And the TFL 28-day challenge helps you to learn about the power of fasting, okay? So you can lose weight, get your blood pressure under control, get your cholesterol level under control, etc. Okay, visit TFL28.com. All right, very quickly here, if we go back to this article from NBC News, and this deals with we have a problem. Federal agencies scramble to fight domestic terror with limited resources. Okay, let's look at this. So the government defines domestic terrorism as acts motivated not by foreign ideologies like Islamic terrorism, but U.S.-based ideologies like white supremacy. Okay, so this is domestic terrorism, and it's good to, when we deal with these different terms, it's good to understand the definition of what they're talking about, because oftentimes these terms are not defined. Okay, so what happened here? Are we still on Facebook? Let's see here. Stand by here. Just a second here. Let me see what's going on. Okay, so it came back up. All right, so we're back on Facebook. All right. In June of 2019, Brett Steele, the former regional director of strategic engagement in the Department of Homeland Security, in the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Terrorism and Prevention Partnerships, testified before Congress about the drastic cuts she witnessed since 2017. Okay, once again, this is an example of how elections have consequences. All right, a presidential election is not about one person versus another person. There's 4,000 positions Trump had to fill in his administration. This is about ideology. This is about the future of the country. 2 years ago, the Department of Homeland Security office handling domestic terrorism, as well as the prevention of other terror threats to the U.S. homeland, quote, managed $10 million in grant funding, 16 full-time employees, 25 contractors, and a total budget of approximately $21 million, end quote, Steele said. And that's what was also reported in the article from theatlantic.com I shared with you from October 2018. Today, the office's mission has broadened to include, quote, an incident where a known or knowable attacker selects a particular target prior to the violent attack, end quote. But its resources have dwindled down to, quote, no contractors and no other means of supporting existing programs beyond a team of 8 dedicated full-time employees and an operating budget of $2.6 million, end quote, she said in her testimony before the House Oversight Committee on June 4th, 2019. More recently, the Department of Homeland Security has made cuts to the following areas: reassigning domestic terrorism analysts. According to 2 Department of Homeland Security officials, a group of intelligence analysts previously dedicated to studying trends in domestic terrorism were reassigned. The reason? Why did they do this? The Trump administration decided the FBI could take on the role without the help of the Department of Homeland Security. Okay? However, some former officials have said losing the Department of Homeland Security analysts in this area hurts its relations with local law enforcement. Former Department of Homeland Security official Nate Snyder said these... Just a second here. Former Homeland Security DHS official Nate Snyder said these analysts would monitor trends, emerging threats, and new behaviors they were noticing among potential domestic terrorists and share that information with local law enforcement. But as of April 2019, those communities, quote, are no longer getting that information from the Department of Homeland Security. The FBI has been allowed to take the lead on putting these products out. They're referring to the FBI's relationship with the state and local government are good, but it is not part of their mission like it is at the Department of Homeland Security. Okay? Number 2, new office, less funding. New office, less funding. In April of 2019, acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan announced the establishment of the Office of Targeted Violence and Terrorism Protection, which will address both domestic and international terror as well as all, quote, acts of targeted violence, end quote. But the agency declined to specify how many staff members or how much money the new office will have. According to Steele's June 4th testimony, the office will have an operating budget of only $2.6 million, but it remains unclear what portion of the funding or manpower will be devoted specifically to domestic rather than foreign terror threats. Number 3, cuts in grants to prevention programs. The Obama administration awarded $10 million in grants to local organizations developing programs to prevent community members from being radicalized by any form of extremist ideology. The Trump administration put the grants on hold, but eventually distributed the funds, with some groups getting even larger amounts than previously promised. But the grants were not renewed past July of 2019. Dr. Denise Bulling, a senior research director at the University of Nebraska's Public Policy Center, received DHS grants to develop prevention tools that could be used in the public health community. Her funding ended on July 31st, 2019. Quote, "If there was funding out there, I would find it. Believe me, I'm not aware of any at this point," end quote, she said. Read the rest of this article, okay? This deals with a reallocation of funds. So at DHS, they're realizing, we have a problem, as it said here, in the article, okay? All right, then also read the article, Trump campaign sees political advantage. Why the hell did this get muted? Testing. Also read the article, Trump campaign sees political advantage in a divisive appeal to working class white voters. Okay, that's from Washington Post. Read that as well. And in that article, this talks about how Trump is stoking, Trump is using bigotry, he's using fear to win working class white voters. Okay, this is his strategy. All right. Okay, so let's continue here. So, Trump sees political advantage in a divisive appeal to working class white voters. All right, this is July 27, 2019. And going back to this article, he talks about, it says, as condemnations have poured in, because he was attacking Representative Elijah Cummings, who is the chair of the House Oversight Committee. He's the chair of the House Oversight Committee. And Elijah Cummings has subpoenaed messages, email messages, text messages from Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, and other people in the Trump administration. So the attack on Cummings underscores Trump's penchant for undermining any attempts by other Republicans to steer clear of overtly racist attacks. As condemnations have poured in over the past 2 weeks accusing Trump of bigotry, including a bipartisan House resolution decrying his go back tweets as racist, Trump's campaign has mounted an all-out effort to defend the president and turn his offensive comments into a political advantage with his base. Okay? Trump's campaign has mounted an all-out effort to defend the president and turn his offensive comments into a political advantage with his base. That's what this is about. They're using this as a campaign strategy. Republican officials say Trump is harnessing the anger of those who continue to feel left behind despite the strong economy. You can't keep bragging about the economy and all these jobs, 7 million unfilled jobs and things like this, right? You can't keep bragging about that, but then try to appeal to these people. You bragging about the records in the stock market or what have you. Most of those people don't even own stocks. So, Republican officials said Trump is harnessing the anger of those who continue to feel left behind despite the strong economy, and steering their fury toward members of Congress he has accused of bad-mouthing the country and embracing socialist policies. He's lying to them. He's playing games with them. That's what this is about. Because instead of saying all the jobs, those manufacturing jobs you said were going to come back, and all those coal jobs you said were going to come back, they're not coming back. But he's not being honest with them. Okay, so check out that article from the Washington Post. And then it talks about how Trump kicked off the controversy with the July 14th Twitter attack on four Democrats, four Democratic members of Congress of color, Representative Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, represents the 13th Congressional District, suggesting that they go back to the, quote, totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, end quote, all right? And all four of them are U.S. citizens. And Ilhan Omar was born in Somalia, but she's a U.S. citizen now. Okay, so these are the games that he's playing with it. And we see some of the strategies and language and fears of the people of the Know Nothing Party. We see them in some of Donald Trump's supporters. Then read the article from New York Times, August 3rd, 2013. Minutes before El Paso killing, hate-filled manifesto appears online. Minutes before El Paso killing, hate-filled manifesto appears online. All right, and this is talking about the. This is talking about the manifesto entitled "The Inconvenient Truth." The Inconvenient Truth. And it draws direct inspiration from the mass murder of Muslims at two mosques in New Zealand in March that left 51 people dead. Okay, it's an unsigned manifesto that has been attributed to the El Paso, Texas killer. The authorities were scrutinizing the 2,300-word screed on Saturday and attempting to determine whether it was written by the same man who ended up killing 22 and injured more than a dozen near the Mexican border. Okay, so read this article also. Now, the FBI, on page 3 of the article, the FBI has said that more Americans have died in domestic terrorist attacks than international ones since September 11th, and that domestic terrorism is increasingly motivated by white supremacist ideology. Domestic terrorism is increasingly motivated by white supremacist ideology. FBI Director Christopher Wray told Congress in July of 2019 that the Bureau had made about 100 domestic terrorism arrests in the first 3 quarters of the year, roughly the same number of international arrests over that same time period. No United States government agency is responsible for designating domestic terrorism organizations, and there is no criminal charge of domestic terrorism. This goes back to what I was saying. There has to be new laws surrounding domestic terrorism. Individuals who are considered domestic terrorists are charged under other existing laws, such as hate crime, gun, and conspiracy statutes. So Congress has to pass new laws dealing with hate crimes, but the laws have to be signed into law by Donald Trump. So we'll see how that works out. Officials have said that domestic terrorists continue to be radicalized online, where individuals are able to align with other extremists become inspired and find the resources they need to act. Okay, so read the rest of this article also. This was a big one from New York Times. Minutes before El Paso killing, hate-filled manifesto appears online. This is from April 3rd, 2019. Okay. All right. We'll post the links here on the thread of the broadcast. I'm going to let everybody know Hidden Colors 5 is coming out soon. We'll have that available at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You'll be able to order. You'll be able to pre-order Hidden Colors 5. It officially releases August 12, 2019, and we'll have a special promotion where you get some free digital downloads of mine with each purchase of Hidden Colors 5. Also, we'll have bundle packs, so look out for that at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Now, the killing in the killing in what was it, in Dayton, okay, the killing in Dayton, we see that 6 of the 9 people who were killed were African Americans. Associated Press reported this on August 4th, 2019. BlackAmericaWeb.com picked up the article. 6 of 9 Dayton victims were African American. Shooter's sister among them. Okay. So 6 of the 9 killed were black, police said, although they'll investigate the possibility of a hate crime. They said the quick timing of the violence made any discrimination in the shooting seem unlikely. Police said Connor Betts, who was white, was killed in less than a minute by officers patrolling the area. Okay, so we'll get more information about what this was really about. We know that former classmates said that there were problems with them. His girlfriend said there were problems, and apparently there were some red flags as well. So we'll look at that. Now, what we see is that Trump is using Facebook ads to amplify his invasion claim. Trump is using Facebook ads to amplify his invasion claim. Okay, so this is a big article from the New York Times from August 5th, 2019. And let's see here. So in this article, it says some of Trump's re-election ads have repeated his inflammatory claims about an invasion on the southern border, language that is under scrutiny after the El Paso shooting. Okay. Now, Donald Trump's re-election campaign has harnessed Facebook advertising to push the idea of an invasion at the southern border, amplifying the fear-inducing language about immigrants that he has also voiced at campaign rallies and on Twitter. So he's doing this in Facebook ads. Since January 2019, okay, Trump's re-election campaign has posted more than 2,000 ads on Facebook that include the word invasion. Part of a barrage of advertising focused on immigration, a dominant theme of his re-election messaging. So once again, he's operating based upon fear. He's operating based upon the fear of the browning of America. He's pushing this hateful rhetoric, okay, this dehumanizing rhetoric once again, okay, to win the election. And we have to make sure that we get out and vote and stop it. Okay, the vote that we in 2016 we had the votes to stop Trump, and we didn't realize that. We can't let this happen again. All right, this is why we're going to need a record number of African Americans to come out and vote. Okay, we need to vote like we did in 2012. We need to vote at 2012 levels when 66.6% of African Americans registered to vote came out and voted. So, a review of Trump's tweets also found repeated references to an invasion, while in his 2016 campaign, advertising heavily featured dark warnings about immigrants breaching America's borders. Trump's language on immigration, particularly his use of the word invasion, is under scrutiny after the mass shooting in El Paso, Texas on Saturday. Okay? Now, divisive and often false claims about undocumented immigrants have been a cornerstone of Donald Trump's political strategy for years. From the Build the Wall chants at his 2016 campaign rallies to his warnings about a migrant caravan ahead of the 2018 midterm elections. We also see his language mimicked by Fox News. Okay? We also see this language mimicked by Fox News as well. In his re-election campaign, Donald Trump has spent an estimated $1.25 million on Facebook ads about immigration since late March of 2019, according to data from Bully Pulpit Interactive, a Democratic communications firm that is tracking the digital advertising of presidential candidates. Those ads represent a significant portion of the roughly $5.6 million that Donald Trump has spent on Facebook ads during that period. Okay, so you can check out the rest of this also. It's an extensive article. This is from August 5th, 2019. How the Trump campaign used Facebook ads to amplify his invasion claim. Okay? How the Trump campaign used Facebook ads to amplify his invasion campaign. Now, because the killing in Texas, some of those people killed were Mexican citizens. If you saw the article that I posted from PBS NewsHour, okay, the Mexican government is looking at it as an act of terrorism against their citizens. PBS.org has an article from August 5th, 2019, Mexico. Texas shooting act of terrorism against Mexicans. Texas shooting act of terrorism against Mexicans. Mexico's government said it considers a shooting at a crowded department store in El Paso, Texas, that left 7 of its citizens dead, Mexican citizens dead. They consider this an act of terrorism against Mexicans and hopes it will lead to changes in U.S. gun laws. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador said Monday that Mexico will respect the debate that will unfold in the United States following Saturday's attack that killed at least 20 people. But he believes the discussion could lead to change north of the border. All right, so pay attention to this also, because things could get serious when you have a country saying they consider this an act of terrorism on their citizens. Okay, so pay attention. Check that out also. That's from NPR.org. Now, if we go back and look in history, there was an article from News1.com from March 31st, 2019, entitled Government Paid Reparations for Italian Americans Who Were Lynched. Government paid reparations for Italian Americans who were lynched. Okay? And in the article, it says this is from March 31st, 2019. The federal government reportedly paid reparations more than a century ago to family members of Italian immigrants who were lynched in New Orleans while black families are still demanding justice. New Orleans plans to issue a proclamation on April 12, 2019, apologizing for the 1891 lynching of 11 Italian immigrants who were killed after acquittals in a police chief's murder, the Associated Press reported. The incident has been called the most deadly lynching in American history, even though African Americans were by far the main victims of lynch mobs. In 1892, the federal government paid $25,000 in reparations to the families of the lynched Italian immigrants, according to the Associated Press. Okay, 11 Italian. So the Associated Press on March 30th, 2019, they posted an old newspaper clipping, and they have a caption here. They posted on Twitter: 11 Italian immigrants were killed in an 1891 lynching by vigilantes angry about acquittals in a case involving the death of a Louisiana police chief. The mayor of New Orleans plans to present an apology to Italian Americans on April 12th. So now there were when we look at the NAACP's website, they have a section there on their website dealing with lynchings. You've heard me talk about it before. And from 1882 to 1968, there were 4,743 lynchings, okay, in this country, and about 581 took place in Mississippi. Mississippi had the most number of lynchings here. I'm trying to find it here on their website. I had it bookmarked, but the bookmarks aren't coming up. Yeah, you can just search for lynchings, and it should come up here. History of lynchings. They have this page. Yeah, 4,743 lynchings. So out of that 4,743 lynchings, there were 1,297 white people who were lynched from 1882 to 1968 as well. Okay, and most of the 581 of these lynchings took place in Mississippi. Georgia was second with 531. Texas was third with 493. Okay, so let's go back to this article. Now, the lynching stemmed from the ambush murder of Police Commissioner David Hennessy in 1890 by 4 men. Hennessy reportedly blamed Italians as he died. Investigators arrested hundreds of suspects from among the approximately 30,000 Italian immigrants who lived in New Orleans at the time. Of that group of suspects, 19 were indicted and 9 of them were tried in court. Jurors acquitted 6 of the men, but were unable to agree in 3 of the cases, okay, as the other suspects remained in jail. A mob decided to take matters into their own hands. The jailers reportedly opened cell doors and told the men to run. 9 of them were gunned down and 2 other men were hung. The U.S. came under pressure from Italy after there were practically no consequences for the New Orleans officials who allowed the killings to take place. Italy demanded that members of the lynch mob face justice and that the government pay reparations to the victims' families. Members of the lynch mob were never punished, but the government paid $25,000 to the families. In December, the U.S. Senate, in a historic vote, unanimously approved a bill to make mob lynching, this is December 2018, unanimously approved a bill to make mob lynching a federal civil rights crime after almost 200 failed attempts to pass anti-lynching legislation over a century. The Senate bill underscored statistics supported by research compiled by Tuskegee University that more than 4,700 people were lynched between the years 1882 and 1968, according to NPR, National Public Radio. About 75% of the victims were African Americans, while, quote, 99% of all perpetrators of lynching escaped from punishment by state or local officials, end quote. It is also worth noting that at least several thousand African Americans and more than 400 black Louisianans were lynched in the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, while several dozen Italians were lynched, author Michael Pfeiffer said. And so they go on to ask, will African American families ever receive compensation for mob lynchings? Now, a new survey, if accurate, found that Americans are now receptive to the controversial idea of the federal government granting reparations to African Americans. So read this article. This is from newsone.com. Okay, government paid reparations for Italian Americans who were lynched. All right, this is, and a lot of people don't know this history. I remember when this article came out in March, and they were talking about the apology that was coming up, etc. Okay, all right. So look, we have to get out of here. Look out for Hidden Colors 5, okay, at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll have information about it also at our website, on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, okay. Look out for that as well. And look out for Hidden Colors 5 at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. This helps us to keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, finance our Sunday night show, pay the bills, etc. All right. And then African American business owners, email me at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. And look out for our, you can also register for my new online course. Class 1 starts Thursday, August 8th, okay, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. This is an 8-week, 16-hour online course where we deal with thousands of years of history, and we deal with what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And you have to understand the chronology of history to understand this. And we deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors also. Okay. All right. So look, hey, we have to get out of here. I'll be in Brooklyn Friday, August 23rd, Saturday, August 24th. Black Agenda on tour. Meet GX, Jice Johnson, Jade Arendelle will be there. I'll be speaking there also. I'll have a vendor table, my DVD lectures there. Also, I'll be doing something at the African World Festival in Detroit the weekend of August 16th and 17th. So I have to figure out exactly what I'll be doing there. I'm not sure if I'll be doing presentations or have a vendor table. So stay tuned for that also. Okay, remember at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.